Thank you for joining us for this exclusive interview coming to you from National Treasury, Pretoria, South Africa, where CNBC Africa and Forbes Africa join forces to interview the man in the hot seat, South African Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Thank you so much for joining us, Minister.
And thank you for having me.
It's been a roller coaster 6 months. How are you holding up?
No, great. I've been used to roller coasters in my life, so this is one more. And this one has been very rewarding because the efforts that government has put in to join forces with business and labor have paid off as far as the first phase of our battle to remain outside of sub-investment grade has been won, and largely through the joint efforts of all of us. And now we start the journey into the next 5 months, which fortunately everybody is aware, is a period during which we must deliver on some of the things that we've committed ourselves to. And I'm quite confident that as a country we will begin to do that, because some of the momentum has already been building up over time in government and in the other sectors as well. So, roller coasters can both be exciting and frightening. So it was frightening enough to bring us all together to make sure we don't head in the wrong direction. And the exciting part is we've got a nice journey ahead of us where we can hopefully all have the reward at the end of the year of saying that our graph is definitely moving in an upward and correct direction.
But a lot of people are saying that you avoided the downgrade to junk status. A lot of people are still saying in the market that it's merely postponed it, maybe for another 6 months. How likely is that?
No, it's true that we've postponed it. But you see, you can't call it mere postponement when you were about to fall over. Not falling over is a major and important victory for all of us. So it's a question of who is the narrative being created by people who believe in a half-full glass or a half-empty glass. Now, I come from the half-full tradition, as do Mr. Mabuza and the business partners we've been working with and many of the trade unionists that we've been working with. We can't tell South Africans or the world that we are now in a state of depression. We have given up hope for this country. And above all, we can't tell the 55 million people in this country that we are going to live in hopelessness forever, when in fact, we have many things going for us as a country. We still have investments coming in. We have kept to our fiscal targets and will continue to actually do so. We will unite the key role players in this country behind a common program, and we've got a few months to actually demonstrate that we are capable of doing it. We have a clear program in terms of reforming key parts of this economy, and making sure that some of the key constraints are now taken out of the way. Haven't been able to do it entirely, but if you take energy as an example, a constraint that can make a big contribution if we create certainty around it and remove it. We've made some progress in that direction as well. And then on the growth side, because that's the fundamental issue that all of us have to confront.
Can I jump in on this growth side? Because your self-stated target is to get this country to 2% growth. We look at the latest data and the economy contracted for the first quarter by 1.2%. Does that make your target that much harder to achieve? How much reform are we going to have to go through over the next 5 months to ultimately head for that 2% target?
It's going to be tough. Nothing is easy in life, and we are living in a tough environment globally and within the continent as well. So I was at an OECD meeting last week where the first line of the chief economist of the OECD report to this big forum that they had was that we are in a low growth environment. I've just been talking to some investors this morning, 2 sets of them coming from different countries. And they also recognize that globally, in certain parts of the world, you're actually going to get minimal growth. In other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia, you're going to get better and more exciting prospects, but not at the levels you've seen before of 10, 11, 12%. On the continent itself, we're learning lessons that if we are commodity-based, particularly if you're an oil-based, and if a substantial part of your revenue, fiscal revenue, is dependent upon the proceeds of resource commodity sales, then you're going to be in difficulties. So we're in a low growth environment, we're in a challenging environment, and we have our own constraints. But the good thing about us is that we face up to our constraints. We talk about them openly. We've listed them very transparently for everybody to see, including the ratings agencies as well, but most importantly for citizens of South Africa. And what's excellent about the last few weeks and the coming weeks is that all of South Africa suddenly understands there's a thing called ratings agencies, there's a thing called ratings, there's a phenomenon called junk, and that we have gone beyond that particular phase. But they also understand that the next few months we've got to actually deliver collectively something different. So I set the 2% mark largely by saying we've got to get this curve moving in the right direction and head there. We all know that in terms of the National Development Plan, we ultimately want to move into the 5% terrain.
Minister, you mentioned that everybody understands what rating agencies are at this juncture, and I have to refer to Radio 702. I was listening to Bruce Whitfield's show, and a self-explained or self-described housewife phoned in, and she said, you know, I just want to say, I am a housewife. I have been battling. Things are getting more and more expensive, but I want to thank Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. I want to thank him from the bottom of my heart for what he has done for this country. So just on the point that the country is united around you, you've touched everybody.
No, but I accept those thanks on behalf of a whole team of people, particularly the hardworking officials of the Treasury. But what we've seen in this period is remarkable leadership, right? Leadership which has been far-sighted enough in each of those sectors to recognize that we can't go do this alone. We've said this for many years. This crisis has brought us together. We must stick together. And the core of this leadership group met a few nights ago, just as Fitch made its announcement as well. And we've recommitted ourselves to developing even a more assertive program over the next few months, as we have done in government also. So I'm excited that we've got a good team of people going here.
But one of the things you need to convince the rating agencies is growth for the future. I mean, it must have been very hard for you this week to see negative growth figures coming out. How are you going to turn this around?
By doing the work that we have to do. Now remember, there's no textbook for growth. You can take as many Nobel laureates as you like and put them around the table. None of them can tell you, these are the 5 things you do to get to 5%. And you'll definitely end up there. So that's the first thing. The second is there's a formula, if you like, that emerges from all of the discourse we have. First, tackle the constraints on growth. So one clearly that we've learned about in South Africa over the past few years is the energy constraint. We've taken ourselves out of the dip. No more load shedding, according to the chief executive of Eskom. What we now need to set for ourselves is a target which says that we need to be ahead of the growth curve. So if we think we're going to head in the direction of 2 and 3% growth over the next few years, make sure that energy supply is ahead of the curve so that energy constraints don't hold back a new mining investment or a new manufacturing investment. Secondly, clear up policy uncertainty. And we've met under the chairpersonship of the President. There's an investment committee. We've identified a clear list of issues, for example, in the mining sector.
But that's a case in point, Minister. I mean, with the mining sector, there's been uncertainty for years now.
I'm telling you that there's a process at play.
Well, how soon can you say that
in the next few months, we'll begin to see some movement in the direction. Our Parliament doesn't sit until after the local government elections in August, but we will actually get there. The third is that we understand we've got to facilitate investment both locally and from foreigners as well. So you have Invest South Africa as a new one-stop shop mechanism. We must ensure, as Minister Davies will, that it gets going. And in time, you will have an efficient machinery to deal with people who want to come and invest. So that's the constraint side. And there's a longer list than that. Secondly, there are clearly parts of the economy in distress, like mining, as you've pointed out. But mining doesn't work without the demand side working as well. So we've got to get the two.
It's a tough balancing act.
It's a tough balancing act. But mining involves long-term investment. So we've got to create the right kind of policy certainty, which Minister Zwane and his colleagues in the Chamber of Mines are talking about. And once they do that, you'll have the certainty element. The rest depends on the commodity cycle and how it begins to actually turn out. The next element is to invest in new opportunities, but perhaps in an old sector. Take agriculture as an example. Huge opportunities for, on the one hand, increasing production, on the other hand, creating jobs, and on the third hand, linking with agro-processing as a manufacturing element. There's been one stream that has been talking to executives in 8 sectors of the economy. They've interacted with about 100 executives across those 8 sectors. In the coming months, the next question that we are talking about, what is government going to do to facilitate investment, and what are business people going to do to invest in each of those sectors as well. One that is thriving at the moment is tourism because of the depreciation in the rand, and we need to make sure that we are as welcoming as we can be. So keep the sun shining and more people will come and enjoy what South Africa has to offer. The last point is that there are new opportunity areas which you've heard about, called the oceans economy, and there's a lot of exciting work happening in the innovation area.
As you've said, there's a lot going for us.
There's a lot going for us.
You've also been very clear, as you've stated in this interview as well, that you have put forward the structural reforms that need to take place in South Africa.
Sure.
Let's go straight to state-owned entities. You mentioned Eskom. The publicly noted statement is that by the end of the year, Treasury will either privatize or close certain state-owned entities, and the rating agencies have said that they see this as a clear risk to the South African economy, the constant bailouts that are extended to state-owned entities.
Well, look, firstly, the fiscus is not at risk, right? Secondly, what we offer as guarantees are very transparent in the budget review, so there's no hidden assistance that these people in state-owned entities get that the world doesn't know about or the ratings agencies don't know about, and including Parliament as well. Thirdly, part of our fiscal target for the coming period is that we want to taper off debt. So in the 3-year medium-term expenditure framework that we set out in February this year, we will taper debt off at about 46% to GDP. But there too, you come back to growth. If the GDP grows, 46 becomes 42 or 43 or whatever the case might be. So change the denominator and all of these ratios begin to change as well, and puts you on a much better and more positive footing. So these are not magical fiddling with numbers that we're talking about. Growth matters as a key element. The last point, and perhaps the most important on state-owned entities, is that there's a process headed by the Deputy President. Each state-owned entity is now being scrutinized. What's its financial stability? What is financial needs? Is it being managed in the right kind of way? Are governance processes working? And the main ones that carry the biggest guarantees are the ones we're focusing on at the moment. And then there's a second tier where we said, and we don't use the P word here, privatization. We look for other ways of
duly noted, we won't use it again in this interview.
The less pressure we have on the fiscus from these sorts of entities, the better leadership we have there, the better technical competence we have there, the more assured the South African public can be that these entities are doing the job that they're required to do, and not doing it on the basis that we have Father Christmas sitting somewhere who will come out to actually help us. They must be self-sustaining in their own right, financially speaking.
A lot of people point to the example of China, which, they raised $120 billion by spinning off their state-owned enterprises, and they still kept controlling stakes. Sure. Why can't South Africa do that?
We're looking at all of the models that are available, and once the processes are complete, we'll see what are the best options available to us, including which ones are serving what developmental purpose. Because sometimes, we can become self-serving and say everything I'm doing is developmental. But let the Deputy President's process really scrutinize. What is the developmental objectives you're meeting? What is it costing to meet those objectives? And what are the non-developmental or non-essential things that you might be doing that somebody else could actually do as well?
Another question people are asking is, as you know better than I, civil service is 50% of your budget. I was with a lot of...
less than that, yeah.
About 50, less than that, but it's still quite a lot. And I was with a lot of financial journalists last night that were saying, why doesn't the minister bite the bullet and cut the civil service and save a large part of the fiscal?
So how many more unemployed people do you want?
Exactly. Well, that is the point. Unemployment is a problem, 26%, but a lot of people are saying surely there must be a way to cut the budget.
Okay, so the first issue is that the cost of compensation is about 460 billion rands. Currently, that's about 37% of non-interest expenditure, which is high. Thirdly, in the budget, we've said that we are now going to take certain measures to start curtailing that expenditure, vacancies not being filled. And the most recent reports that we've received from provinces where the bulk of teachers and health staff are actually employed is very encouraging. Many provinces, because of this pressure from the fiscus, have actually taken some assertive steps to begin to curtail employment at the provincial level.
The rating agencies have also stated that the risk of political instability, especially in the lead up to the August the 3rd municipal elections, could wreak havoc with the economy. Your response to their concerns on that front?
Well, in the first instance, elections are things that happen as part of our democratic environment, both in South Africa and elsewhere. And if we want to get some context to this, you can see, as we are sitting 2 weeks ahead of Brexit, the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom, the kind of disruptive political noises, divisions within the Conservative Party, people crossing the floor yesterday because wrong facts are being actually put out. So you're going to get that kind of noise, including the impact on the financial markets as well in the British context. Now, we are nowhere near there. But what we do require is for political leaders to recognize that there is a relationship between the way we conduct ourselves politically and the kind of economic confidence or the confidence in our economy that we create. And today we live in a world where politics and economics are very closely related, whether it's here or Brazil or anywhere else in the world. The prospect of a particular candidate winning the elections in the United States is also giving people a wake-up call. And that's interesting that in the biggest economy in the world, you also have apprehensions about what the political outcomes of democratic processes might be. So in our case, the appeal that we would be making is be aware of the wider context, fight the political fight, or have the political contest in search for votes for a particular political party, whoever you might be. But let's do it in a way in which we bring credit to South Africa's democracy and bolster the economic narrative that we're trying to create.
A visible barometer of the stability in South Africa, both economic and political, is the rand. You definitely can't forecast the rand, and I think that's the problem right now, is that small businesses out there are saying we just need to know that there's some stability in the currency. It doesn't matter how weak it is or how strong it is, but let it be stable so that we can make decisions that enable our businesses to survive.
Look, currency volatility is something now that nobody has any control over, firstly. Secondly, there are mega forces and dynamics in the globe that actually influence what happens to a currency, in as much as they are domestic factors as well. So look at what's happening to the pound, or every day that something happens to the dollar means something happens to the rand, which are not necessarily related to domestic considerations as well. So because we have a freely floating exchange rate, there are plus factors. So as everybody would tell you, it's an important shock absorber for any volatility on the one hand, and secondly, on the negative side, it creates the uncertainty for exporters and importers as well, particularly for importers.
But domestic considerations have had a heavy hand in rand weakness.
They have, and you can't deny that. All I'm saying is that there's an interplay.
Agreed.
Between global factors and local factors, and sometimes we think it's a local factor at play and it's the global.
Where would you like to see the rand as a value against the dollar for long-term stability? What would be suiting?
That's the one thing we never begin to get into
Yes,
as finance ministers. I think all of us, what we are looking for is fair value, less volatility, greater certainty, and a contextual environment in which there's less negativity towards emerging markets.
In your efforts to reduce debt of this country, cut expenditure, what kind of painful cuts do you think this country may be looking at in the next 6 months or a year?
We've made the cuts for this year, and we had to look quite hard to find money for zero increases for student fees, finding money for our subscription to the BRICS New Development Bank, and a few other items that needed to be financed, both as a result of expenditure cuts and managing the tax side, particularly in relation to fiscal drag. We've indicated very transparently that in the coming 2 years, we need to find 15 billion rands in each year, either from expenditure or the tax side. Within government, we have an 8-step process. And the one thing we have been very clear about is that the last 2 steps, which involve curtailing social expenditure, is not where we want to get, which means the rest of us have to take the pain, including the National Treasury, for example. So the key as we go forward is not so much about the cutting side, because we'll manage that. We still have options in terms of expenditure management and in terms of managing tax measures. The key focus that we want all South Africans to keep their eye on: how do we grow the economy and how do we create jobs?
In closing, Minister, CNBC Africa is a business channel. We're not interested in politics and in...
But you just showed that you were, but it's okay.
We've got to ask a little around the rating agency concerns, and one of their concerns, the political instability. But we are very interested in the relationship between business and particularly National Treasury, because this seems to be something of a winning combination at this juncture. Can you, just in conclusion, give us some insight into how this working group is evolving and the level of support between business and National Treasury?
It's actually it's the cooperation between government generally and business, because remember we first met on the 29th of January as a result of the exchanges that we had before Davos and after Davos between business and government, where the realization that the ratings might be beginning to move in the wrong direction could hurt all of us at the end of the day, including the 55 million citizens in our country. That then led to a meeting on the 9th of February in Cape Town, chaired by the President, with the Deputy President present as well, and some about 120 representatives of labor and business, largely business, present as well. And it was there that the President mandated Mr. Mabuza and myself to continue with this process. And the two of us have then had many, many meetings with the business sector and business with the labor sector and together. And then most recently on the 9th of May, we gave feedback at a meeting with the President and Deputy President on the various projects that we were able to get going. And it's a huge credit to the business sector that they have created the Small Business Stroke Entrepreneurs Fund, that together we've been looking at new investment areas for business as well. And then concretely, both on their side and our side, presenting a united front and face to both investors and the ratings agencies, exemplified very well during the March roadshow that we had, London, Boston, New York, where it was great to have, by the time we got to New York, all three constituencies, Labour, business and government, together, each one meeting both the investors, listening to the challenges and the questions that they were posing, understanding what, as a representative of government, National Treasury confronts as issues that are raised, and importantly, having the opportunity to talk to ratings agencies. When the ratings agencies came here, normally there's a very narrow group of people that actually meet them, and this time we made sure that the broadest possible spectrum of people in political parties, including the Secretary General of the ANC, the Deputy President as the highest level of government, the business sector put together a very broad delegation, as did the Labour sector as well. And if we keep that going, then I think we will build confidence in our partnership. We will develop greater trust amongst us, and that trust will emerge from concrete things being done. The first evidence of that is now available. Over the next few months, we hope to build on that as a partnership.
What is the general feeling right now? That's one question I have. I mean, things have been very tough the last 6 months. Do you think there's been a feeling that this is it? This is the time for people to stand up?
No, this is the time where we've just managed to stay away from the cliff. Now you've got to retreat from the cliff and make sure that you can point out to the world, these are the concrete things we are doing, because we're serious about taking the South African economy in a different direction, in a better direction. And as an eternal optimist, I believe we are.
Minister Gordhan, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us for this exclusive interview coming to you from National Treasury in Pretoria, South Africa, where CNBC Africa and Forbes Africa have joined forces to speak to Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan.